Hello there, and welcome once more to the Open Door Show from a Property CEO. It's really good to have you here. My name is Ritchie, and as if you didn't know, and perhaps you don't know, of course, if you didn't know, you now do know. There we go. It's great to have you here as always. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of small-scale property development. What is property development? I'm talking about repurposing buildings. People often ask me, what's development? Is that a quick flip? Not really. We're actually taking something from one use and turning it into another use. It could be a bit of land that we're going to convert and put something onto it, or it could be a building that we're going to convert, say a commercial building, turn it into residential. Small scale property development, and small scale, because typically between 5 and 20 units is a real sweet spot. I often get asked that, so I thought I'd mention it. Look, as always, we're going to be talking to some of the movers and shakers, and I've got a real treat for you today, the movers and shakers in the business, and shining a spotlight on areas where we think there could be some good opportunities. And today, what a cracking opportunity we are going to talk to you about. Above all, and most importantly, you know how it works here at Property CEO, we like to have a bit of fun. So what's coming up on today's show? Well, it's all about planning. Permitted development rights. Permitted development rights is the secret. It's the thing that minimizes the risk for us as developers. And we have got potentially one of the biggest, most significant changes coming up since the last most significant changes. They just seem to keep rolling forward. But this is big. So have a listen up today. Grab a pen and paper. Get yourself ready. Because on today's show, we have got Colin Smith from CJS Planning. Colin, hello there. How are you?
Hello, Richie. How are you? Nice to see you again.
I'm very good. And of course, Colin says, see you again, because actually we see each other all the time. Those that don't know, you work with us quite a bit, don't you, Colin?
Yes, it's almost, I'm not stalking you, I promise.
So Colin is, we like to sort of say, our resident planning consultant. He doesn't actually live with us, although, to be fair, if I gave him the offer, he might come down because my wife cooks some mean chili. So you never know, he might be down for that. You interested in a bit of chili?
Definitely. I prefer curry.
Well, he wasn't even going to get an invite, and now he's putting out requests. Unbelievable. But actually, Colin works with all of our students. You come to all of our in the room events, and you work on our fast track virtual event. You help train all of our students, don't you, Colin? You enjoy that?
Very, very much. It's lovely helping everybody, to be honest. It's very, very rewarding.
Yeah, no, likewise. I think helping people when you get to a certain age, like Colin and I are, it's great actually to give back. So we do thoroughly enjoy it. Colin, lots going on, lots
Yes, lots.
happening in the permitted development field. Where do we start? Should we talk about what's happening with serviced accommodation? So we just talk about that to start with. Can you just update our audience on what's going on there?
Yes, certainly. So, going through Parliament at the moment is something called the Levelling Up Bill. And we're hoping there's just been a press release actually that on the 7th of November, we're hoping that this will all go through royal assent, which effectively means it's transitions into law, becomes an actual act of parliament. So we're only a few weeks away from that. I always was very hopeful that we'll get it by the end of the year. It might be that we're going to get all of this stuff much sooner than that. And we've got a few things to go through. We're going to, like Richie said, we're just going to start off with serviced accommodation. Now, the thing about serviced accommodation, it's always been a little bit of a grey area. Some councils don't mind it, other councils do mind it. London have got their 90-day rule and so on and so forth. So it's been a little bit of a grey area, and it's been very difficult for the local authorities to control. So what the government are now proposing is a brand new use class, and they've called it C5. Okay, so we've got C3, which is normal residential. We've got C4, which is your small up to 6 people HMOs, and now we're going to have the brand new use class called C5. Now, this isn't anything that you need to apply for. Everybody will have that right. Okay, so if you've got a normal residential use in your property, whether it's a house or a flat and so forth, and it's a normal C3 use class, so it's a normal residential use, you can use this brand new use class called C5 to basically legally and without any grey areas go to serviced accommodation. Now, the reason that the government are doing this is that they do want to have local councils, local authorities, a little bit of control so that if they're trying to preserve their local family housing, for example, or if they think there are too many holiday lets in an area, that sort of thing, then they're able to control it with something called an Article 4 direction. And those of you that run HMOs, little C4 HMOs, you're probably aware of that. And Article 4 effectively gives the council the control, the power to withdraw that particular permitted development right. But this is a bit of a game changer. It means that everybody will now be able to run their serviced accommodation properties without, the problem of should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Am I legal? Am I not legal? So I think it's a very positive step forward, Ritchie.
No, that's good. I mean, people listening to this show, we don't really get involved in buy-to-let HMOs or serviced apartments. But there's a bit of news there, which is really good news. And by the way, most people are probably aware, if you're not aware, we are actually a partnership company with PIN, Property Investors Network, Simon Zucci's business. We formed a partnership arrangement with them, and they do know about serviced accommodation. So if you want to get involved in that, always reach out to us. We can help give you an introduction to PIN, or reach out to PIN directly for that. So that's a big one, serviced accommodation. But look, in terms of development, Colin, there's this massive change that you spoke to some of our students about the other day, really hot off the press. Can you tell us what this is about? It's to do with hotels, isn't it?
It is. Now, when we're talking about permitted development, we do like to go what we call the low hanging fruit. We like to make things easy for ourselves. So we're only interested in two permitted development classes. One is Class G. I'll be talking about that in a sec. But the other big one is Class MA. All right. That's the one that we tend to go to first. All right. And the big change here is, believe you me, it is massive. Now, previously, or up to now, shall I say, the use classes of a building was basically down to use class E. So we could then basically have shops, we could have professional services, restaurants, we could have offices, light industrial, we could even do gyms and community centres and things like that. They were all under use class E, and we were able to use permitted development right to change anything from E into residential. Okay, but here's the big thing. This is what's happening. They're going to include now hotels. All right, so use class C1, hotels, bed and breakfasts, boarding houses, and I think even hostels, okay, under use class C will now be included within the permitted development right MA. Now, this is massive. How many hotels do you see? How many times have you thought to yourself, I'd love to be able to convert a hotel into residential? Let's be honest, a hotel is virtually a set of flats as it is. So this is a really, really massive change.
I think, Colin, a couple of points there, as you say. First of all, there are so many empty hotels, and we're thinking of these often these rundown hotels that exist in and around our towns and cities. But you say that layout, because often we've had students come to us and say, can I convert a hotel? And we go, no, you can't. Because literally a hotel bedroom often is, 12, 15 square meters, depends what hotel it is. You only need two or three of them connected together. You've got yourself a flat, and all the services are in place, aren't they? So, they really do work.
Absolutely. They're sort of ready to go. And we're not talking about your little hotels either. They could be the much bigger buildings, much bigger establishments. And as Ritchie says, they're already virtually in place. You just need to put a few doors in the connecting walls, and there you got it. You got yourself some flats. This is a big one. And also bear in mind this, that the value of a C1, a hotel, okay, if it's been vacant for quite a while, let's be honest, its value could be really quite reduced. Okay, so with the enhancement of a permitted development approval to residential, you have in effect increase the value of that property. Now think of that from a funding point of view. Okay, so you buy something for X amount, but we get that enhancement, and you're able to borrow, as you probably know, with commercial finance, up to about 70% of that property. Well, if you get a 30% enhancement through the PD right, really you're getting that finance for free. You're getting 100% finance, and that is a big thing.
Yeah, no, there's certainly some funders that will look at that. Make sure you get the right funder. If you do work with us, we always direct our students to the right funders that will support that type of deal, but they definitely will. And so I don't like the phrase, but no money down, that sort of phrase comes to mind. You don't have to put cash into that deal, which is phenomenal. And these hotels, we're not talking probably about the Premier Inns or the travel lodges or those sort of things. A lot of these are going to be privately owned hotels, which we know in this country have suffered, from a business perspective. Airbnb through the service department, which we were just talking about, has really got the momentum and knocked the business proposition. So a lot of these vendors are going to be super keen, even if they're just ticking the hotels along, probably going to be super keen to vacate.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a massive opportunity. Fingers crossed for the 7th of November when this comes in.
So 7th of November, it's going to come in. Now, as always, it's the early adopters that's going to take the advantage, because what will happen, you've already talked about, Colin, that increase in value just by getting that permitted development right. It won't be too long before the commercial agents have got a bit savvy and worked this out. At the moment, probably most of them haven't, but they will work this out, and the value of some of those buildings will go up. So it's actually, if you can get in now, it's in the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to have that advantage. And when we talked about size, we used to only be able to convert up to 1,500 square meters. I think that's changing as well, isn't it, Colin?
Yes, it is. 1,500 square meters is big. Okay, that is a big space. But believe it or not, they're going to double it now. They're looking to double it from 1,500 to 3,000 square meters. That's a department store, isn't it? That is a big building. So to actually double that is absolutely amazing. And the great thing about this is that some buildings were already previously converted under permitted development, but they had to leave an element of commercial there because they couldn't really quite reach the 1,500 limit, if you see what I mean. But now they'll be able to revisit that and convert the remainder. So that, again, is a massive game changer.
We're not talking about a 25-bed hotel. We're probably talking about a 100, 150-bed hotel that you could convert by the time you take all the commercial space into account. 150-bed hotel, you could convert the whole thing into residential. Now, you might not want to go that big as a scheme, but the rules are changing so you can. It's a big residential scheme, isn't it?
That is a very big. You're quite right. You're looking probably 100 flats plus. Yep.
Wow. And if we then we talk about this vacancy, because we used to have, or we currently do have, one should say, a requirement for a building to be vacant for 3 months, completely vacant, completely empty, before we can even apply for permitted development right class MA. And sometimes that catches us out, causes us a bit of problem. We've got to do an exchange and maybe delay completion, or we've got to fund that building for 3 months. Obviously, we're talking about MA overall, but particularly these hotels who might be hanging on as a business, they might not be vacant. But am I right in saying this vacancy, 3-month vacancy rule is also likely to be removed?
Yeah, the government have recognised that this could actually create a little bit of a log jam. Okay, if you can't actually put your application in until it's been vacant for a whole 3 months, and that's a quarter of a year, that's a long time, and you can't put your application in, then the government have realised that this basically could create a delay. Now, notwithstanding the fact that conveyancing can take probably 2 months as it is now anyway, but removing that requirement again is a massive step forward. You've got to remember all of these rights that the governments are proposing, all these changes, shall I say, is because there was a housing shortage, and it's as simple as that. We need to create more housing units, and the government realised that, and they're trying to find ways of streamlining the process to make it easier to make that delivery. So yeah, by removing this 3-month vacancy requirement is again, it's another big change.
I think what any of the listeners today, Colin, will be thinking, you are a smart cookie, because you've identified that 3 months is a quarter of the year. And I think that's a fantastic bit of maths you worked out in your head there and then.
Thank you.
So as you say, the government, the reason they're doing it, and a lot of people might think, well, this all sounds too good to be true. But the government need houses. They're penalising landlords left, right and centre, because landlords probably won't vote any differently. There's lots of pressure about rent reform and landlords being greedy and stuff, which, you all have your own views on that. But the government are definitely trying to support developers. They want new houses. What else is being done, Colin, in these proposals that we're hoping to get out in the next few months to ease some of these permitted development rights as well? Because I think there's some changes for where we can do them in certain areas as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. So up to now, you couldn't do this stuff with Class MA in areas of outstanding natural beauty. Okay. You couldn't do it in a national park. Well, they're actually proposing that you can do that. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are we trying to preserve our heritage and so forth? Well, that's arguable. But nonetheless, once again, the government are realizing there's a lot of stock out, building stock out there which has the opportunities that we could actually take advantage of. Now, the other big thing, talking about areas, is there was a restriction of what you can do with the ground floor of a commercial unit in a conservation area. Essentially, they don't want to change the external appearance in a conservation area on the ground floor, and you can sort of understand that, but they are actually proposing to remove that. Quite what the impact of that would be, that remains to be seen. But nonetheless, they are certainly trying to grease the wheels here and make things a lot easier by relaxing the rules of where you can actually do these permitted development rights.
I think, Colin, you said there, like areas of outstanding natural beauty, national parks, and is that the right thing? I think the reality, we're talking about converting existing buildings. We're not talking about extending them. We're not talking about changing the volume. That would be a planning application. So those buildings already exist. A lot of them are empty or run down. All we're doing is revitalizing effectively brownfield land, brownfield stock, and reinvigorating an area by putting residential use in there. So yeah. I surely can only be a good thing, really. What do you think personally?
Personally, I do think it's a good thing. I can understand the good old NIMBYs not liking it, not in my backyard. But overall, the drive is we need housing stock. That's what it's all about. And as you rightly say, these rundown hotels in these lovely areas, in these countryside areas, why can't we have some residential units there? There will be some rules attached to all of this. And as you say, we're not actually getting permissions to change the buildings. We're only changing the use of the buildings. So, maybe it's not so bad. But personally, I think it's a good thing because we'll be improving our housing stock, countrywide.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, providing the right housing stock and the right location is a necessity. We don't want, the reason that often our rents are so high, in my opinion, is because there's just not enough stock. More stock on the market for purchase. I know affordability comes into it, but more stock, they become more affordable. They have to be because that's competition. More stock, more affordability means probably a less of a requirement for renters, and rent will then reform itself by default. But I think in terms of converting these buildings, I think, as a society, we have to change. One thing that immediately pops into my mind is think of the big country houses, the big country estates, which were privately owned estates, and how many of those were turned into hotels. Now, that would have been an outcry at the time, but of course, those families couldn't afford to maintain those big estates. And many of them just went into rack and ruin and never survived. And I guess a lot of this stock here, it needs changing. Times have moved on. So actually, replacing, residents sleeping on there 1 or 2 nights a week to residents living there permanently, it's not a fundamental change. It can only be good. Okay, yeah. So that Class MA is massive. And you say you reckon this is coming in November?
Yes, apparently, according to a press release that I read just yesterday, that's what they're hoping to do. I mean, cross our fingers. My hope was that it will come in by the end of the year. If it comes in November, that'll be even better, obviously.
And of course, it depends when you're listening to this. Yesterday might be a very, very different time for you. So yesterday might have actually been 2 weeks ago. But anyway, we'll leave you with that thought. You might go, hang on, there's another press release. And of course, things are changing all the time. Massively powerful. Okay, we just talked about C5 accommodation coming in, which is going to be useful for people out there. The massive implications of this extension of Class MA. You mentioned Class G. What's happening to Class G? Is this as big a deal, or what's going on here, Colin?
Well, Class G is one of my favourites. I've got to be honest, because there's lots of. If you listen to me on previous broadcasts, I'm always going on about all the loopholes that are in Class G. But what the government are now proposing to do is to increase the number of flats that you can create over a commercial unit. They're going to increase that allowance from 2 flats up to 4 flats. So whereas you could use my strategies previously, whereby you take a commercial unit and then you can have two flats above, you could then split that commercial unit, and you don't need permission to split a commercial unit, and that gives you another two and then another two and so on and so on. But now we're talking fours. So now it goes 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. I mean, this is, this is a big change, especially when you know how to daisy chain all of these permitted development rights together. So my beloved Class G, is it getting even better? I love it.
And when you say daisy chaining, what you're actually saying there is linking like permitted development right MA with permitted development right G, putting the two together to maximize what we can convert without the need for full planning. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And getting the sequence right is absolutely vital. And the same rules don't necessarily apply. I mean, each one needs to be looked at individually. Each property needs to look at, on its own merits, as it were. But you can daisy chain MA and G, or backwards, G and MA, plus all the other bits and pieces as well. So, if you know how to use permitted development, it's extremely powerful.
So going back to this Class G, and as Colin said, there are some tips and tricks which he works on with our students. We try and help them to actually go take a commercial unit, split it into two, then now you can get your four flats. Sometimes it was quite tricky to go beyond that because the commercial unit in itself just didn't have enough value in it if we split it into four. But of course, now you'd only have to split it into two to get those same number of flats. So it really is helping unlock schemes, which even with your tips and tricks before, weren't viable. So this really is it's a big change, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. As long as you've got the physical space to accommodate the residential flats, then you can now use it. I now see Class G. It might even, in some cases, be more powerful than MA. I am looking at these changes in a lot of detail right now, but like I say, I love Class G, and I'm thinking, this might even be better than Class MA. And the changes to Class MA are pretty amazing, especially with the hotel changes.
Colin, what would you say to someone out there who's listening to this and go, yeah, I like what you're saying, but actually I really want to go and do some land assembly and some new build? What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, if you've got a bit of experience and a few £1,000 to burn, by all means, go and do it. But what we always say is we are looking at the low hanging fruit. Okay. We're looking for the easy rules. Now, bear this in mind. The government are making the rules easier for us. So with land assembly or other forms of development, you're basically having to negotiate with landowners. You're very much in the land of promise with this. Your values are very much hope values, in my opinion. Whereas with permitted development, they've got maybe 5, sometimes 6 boxes to tick. Yes, you sometimes need more detailed reports, okay? But if you look at how local authorities assess those applications and you basically cut and paste of what they already said, if you know what you're doing, permitted development is definitely the easy route. And in the time it takes to do all your land assembly and so forth, you could do 2 or 3 of these. So, especially if you're just starting out, I would always advocate go down the permitted development route.
Okay, so I think one of the big things, and a lot of people might not know this or might not remember it, is when we're going permitted development route, there's only a handful of things that we have to tick the boxes of, and they cannot apply, they being local planning authority, local or national planning policy at us, can they, Colin? It's all irrelevant. They can only tick those boxes.
They need to apply the national rules where it is applicable, and in some cases, they do apply the local ones, but the actual power, the subjectiveness of it is, and it ought to be, largely removed. It should be a much more objective type of process. It's either is or it is not. It either complies or it does not. That is where we're heading towards. And luckily for us, I mean, these PD rights have only actually been around for the last couple of years or so. And already we've had a lot of appeal decisions where the government's inspectorate have actually said, well, local authorities, you haven't been looking at the guidance correctly, and we're now laying down the rules of exactly what you can and can't do. And as time goes on, the power of these becomes much more clear. So, whereas with a planning application, it can be subjective, as I said, you could have two planning officers side by side and fundamentally disagree on a scheme, right? But with permitted development, that is not the case. You either tick those boxes, provide that information, or you don't. It's as simple as that. So I think PD, especially when you're starting out, is the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We're not going to talk about it today because we just don't have time. But Colin, just very quickly, there's stuff going on with barns. Just very quickly summarize that.
Yeah, quick 30 seconds. Well, Class Q is where you can take agricultural buildings and convert them into residential. Currently, the limit of the number of homes that you can actually create with a barn conversion is 5. That's a lot, isn't it? But they're actually looking to increase that, to double it to 10. So it's jumping from 5 homes to 10 homes. And they're doing that by increasing the space limit, and it's currently 465 square meters. I know it's a lot of numbers to remember, but they're increasing it up to 1,000 square meters. And what's really weird is it actually going to allow you to put extensions on your barns as well. Now, here's the thing, okay? The number of times that I'm actually asked, I've got a stable, I would like to convert my stables into a bungalow. Can I do it? No, you can't, because basically a stable is like a garage for your pet horse. That's what it actually is. Okay, it's not agricultural. However, the government are now saying that they want to have stables and equestrian buildings within Class Q and be able to change those to residential. And that's a biggie. That is similar scale to having hotels to be changed to residential. Now you'll be able to change stables and equestrian buildings to residential as well. We haven't got enough time to talk about that in any detail, but it's very, very exciting.
But you can't, just as a summary, if people are listening to this today, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of listeners here that are regular listeners, but people that perhaps just tuned in and thought, I wouldn't mind getting into small scale property development where you can earn six-figure sums, 100, 200, 300,000 profit. It's simple, but it's not easy. Right. The point of permitted development rights is to remove some of that risk and make it easier. Would you categorically say that's the place you should start and get some money in your pocket as a new developer?
Yes, I think that you should start there. I think that you should be really good and focus on one thing. Get really, really good at one thing. You know, just concentrate on Class MA and Class G, those permitted development rights. Understand the sort of buildings that you're looking at to understand what the opportunities are, because that is definitely the easy, almost turnkey way of looking at it. So yeah, you know, don't look at land assembly, don't look at anything that requires local authority approval as such, you know, as in local policies. Go for permitted development because the rules and what you're wanting to comply with are clearly set out. There might be a little bit of a grey area there, but, you know, just look at how local authorities assess their applications and you won't go far wrong. PD all the way.
PD all the way. Brilliant. Colin, if people want to reach out and contact you, I know you're often busy, but there might be an introductory sort of that you could do to steer them in the right direction. What's the best contact details?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, obviously you can get me through propertyCEO, but my owner company is cjsplanning.com. You can see that's at CJS, that's me, planning.com. And on there's a contacts page and you can get me on there. But of course, I'm on Facebook all the time and you'll probably recognize me. So yeah, seek me out, contact me. I'm always happy to help.
Good stuff. Excellent. And as Colin said, you know, he works with us. So actually, if you end up becoming a student advisor, you'll be talking to Colin all the time. So if you don't like him, well, it's just tough. That's the way it is. That's what he does. He works with our students. Colin, thank you for coming in today. I do appreciate the update. We'll obviously bring you back as soon as we know what the government's actually going to do. Would that be okay to bring you back at a later date? And once we know?
Thank you very much. Yes, I look forward to that. Be great.
Thank you, Colin. Right, we'll let Colin go. Hey, how good was that? I mean, that is big game changing. Okay. If you're out there, I don't know whether you're a landlord or whether you're thinking of getting into property, maybe you're just fed up with your existing job. Guys, girls, seriously, you can get out there. And if you're afraid of hard work, don't bother. Okay. But if you're not afraid of hard work, if you're willing to put the effort in, this stuff can be done. You can go out there and seriously, I've got students first time out, 100, 200, 400,000 profit out of their first deal. It's not going to happen in 12 months. Okay. It's not get rich quick. But 18, 24 months, if you start now, maybe 24 months time, you'll have 200 or 300,000 in your pocket. Would that change your life? Not easy. Okay. Don't do rah-rah here. It's not easy, but it's entirely possible. Hopefully we've whetted your appetite a little bit. If you'd like to dip your toe in the water, a little bit of training, a little bit of free training I've put together, take this down. Okay. Grab a pen and paper, propertyceo.co.uk/SFR, propertyceo.co.uk/SFR. That stands for six-figure roadmap. It's a roadmap for you start earning six-figure sums year on year. Have a look at that free training. See if you enjoy that. And I look forward to seeing you soon on the next edition of Open Door. Cheers now. Bye-bye.